Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Whole thing, dude.
American public and global public finally understands UFOs are real.
Non-human, exotic origin, vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
Welcome back to the Disclosure Team YouTube channel for a special video. I have some guests with me today, and I'm not going to waste any more time, so I will bring them in one by one. First, I'd like to welcome Dr. David Clark. David, how are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
My pleasure. I'm really excited for this one. Next up, we have Matthew Ilsley. How you doing, Matthew?
Gents. Very well, thank you.
Good to see you. Yeah, all good, thank you. And finally, we have Giles Stevens. Giles, thank you for being here.
Hi, guys.
So yeah, so an exciting video this time. Calvine, back to talking about Calvine. I think initially the best thing to do is to give a brief overview of the case. So David, if you don't mind, take it away.
Okay, well, it's most people, if you've got any knowledge of ufology, and certainly British ufology, will know you will have probably some basic knowledge of this case. It's a unique case. It happened in 1990. We first came into public domain when Nick Pope mentioned it very briefly in his first book, Open Skies, Closed Minds, and in, I think it was 2009, when the Ministry of Defence released their second tranche of UFO documents at the National Archives, where I was running the public disclosure project that they were involved in. That was the first time we actually saw some Ministry of Defence documents on it, and there wasn't a lot, very sparse, just a couple of memos from the UFO desk officer, a guy called Owen Hartop, who was the UFO desk officer before Nick Pope, because Nick Pope took that job in 1991. And basically he was briefing the Ministry of Defence, saying that two guys out walking at a place called, he actually spells it wrongly, Clavine. It was actually Calvine, and he spells Pitlochry wrong as well. It's north of Pitlochry. Took 6 photographs of a large diamond-shaped object in the sky that was shadowed by what appeared to be a Harrier jet. And that they'd sent these photographs to the Scottish Daily Record. So at the point he was writing, he was basically saying, briefing ministers and saying that they've got this story as an exclusive. They're going to use it. You need to be aware of this. You know, we've sent these photographs to our experts. They've been unable to identify the large diamond-shaped object. They also said, rather bizarrely, that although it appears as a Harrier there, and also a very distant second Harrier as well, they haven't been able to identify at that stage where those Harriers came from, because there were no operational Harriers at that time in Scotland. And after that point, the file just goes dead. There's nothing else except in another file, a DI-55, which was the Defence Intelligence Staff branch that actually did the UFO investigations. There's a very enigmatic few papers later that same year, or I think the next year, where they talk about retasking the photo analysis, so that they got someone to either make a huge blow-up drawing of this thing, so it could be projected onto a wall or a whiteboard. And there's some very brief documents about that, but nothing else. The only other thing in the files was a response to a parliamentary question that was asked by Martin Redmond MP, who was my local MP at the time for Don Valley. And he basically, having read Nick Pope's book, asked a question in the House of Commons, like, what do you know about this thing? And they basically just stonewalled him and said, we looked at the images, we sent the original negatives back to the Daily Record, and we couldn't identify the diamond-shaped object, but there was no defence significance, the usual sort of MOD bland statement that says nothing. So I made some inquiries at that time in 2009 when I was working on the National Archives release. I contacted the Daily Record, spoke to someone on Picture Desk. I can't remember the name of the person. Someone on News Desk. They both said, "Yeah, we are aware of the story as well," because they ran a story about it when this file was released. But no one here remembers what happened. No one can explain what happened to the negatives. We don't know why we didn't run the story. I pushed it as far as I could, but I had so many other stories that were in that in those files that I just eventually had to leave it. I think I made a Freedom of Information Act request to JARIC, which is the RAF photo agency, and they usual thing. Oh, sorry, no, can't find anything. We destroy everything after 5 years anyway. So I left it there, and it wasn't until I think must be over 10 years later when Matthew emailed me out of the blue, basically saying he'd been making some inquiries into the story, and at that time, the files from 1990 should have been opened properly at the National Archives under the 30-year rule. So I was waiting for the page that had got the name of the witness that had been redacted to open on the 1st of January 2020, and then we had this situation where. Because the National Archives and the Ministry of Defence are interpreting data protection in such an extreme way that rather than opening that file and releasing the name as they had done for all the previous files up to that point, they basically said, no, sorry, we're having a 74 or 56-year closure, so the name was going to be withheld, not the file, just the name of the witness. Was going to be withheld for a further 56 years, and that I actually made I got so far with an appeal to the Information Commissioner about that. Didn't get anywhere, and that's the point that Matthew came into the picture.
And you mentioned there in the National Archive files. I've got just wanted to show the image here.
Yeah.
Of the only image that is available through that method. Yeah. So let's bring that up. And that was it.
Yeah, pretty poor.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we don't know actually even whether that is a photocopy of a print, or whether it's a copy of a line drawing, because we know that the actual retasking, they were asking for detailed line drawings to be made. And there is this whole story as well, which I've neglected to mention, that is referred to by Nick Pope, that when he joined the UFO desk in 1991, and he told me this when I interviewed him in London in 2001, there was a huge 3 foot by 3 foot poster on the wall of the best of the Calvine images, and it was like a talking point in the office, and people used to come in and say, "What the hell is that?" sort of thing. And his story is that his head of section, the real head of the UFO desk, John Clark, or JRG Clark, who we've never been able to track down, that he was really worried about it because there was this whole series of questions in 1991 and 1992 about whether the United States were flying a secret reconnaissance aircraft from a base in Scotland, RAF Machrihanish, and the Scotsman did a big piece on this, a big expose, and it led to a load of questions in the House of Commons where ministers were being questioned. Have you given authorization to the USA to fly their spy planes around and land them? And they denied it, even though the internal papers show that they actually thought this might be possible. So Nick Pope says that he thought his boss was really worried about the possibility that this could be some sort of top secret experimental aircraft, and that at some stage he took the poster down, locked it in a drawer, and probably shredded it or destroyed it. And he actually said, I think he came out with this in a story that was published in 2012 in the Huffington Post. So that's all anyone knew about this at the time. Yeah. I mean, all the sort of Scottish ufologists like Ron Halliday and Malcolm, got his second name now. Robinson, yeah. They knew nothing about this story at all, which is very, very peculiar. You know, that no one, despite the fact that the witnesses had gone to the Daily Record as well, and the Daily Record had not run it, it's baffling.
Yeah. And for anybody watching, if you look in the description below, you can go and read David's extensive work on the case to get the finer details as well. And you mentioned Nick Pope there, and it was a few years later that he was asked to do a recreation of the image as well.
Yeah.
So I've got that. Let's have a look at that.
This is for the Sun, wasn't it, in October 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is he must have a remarkable memory. That's all I can say on that point, because so yeah, a lot of people, unfortunately, because they've seen this online, they assume that is the actual photograph.
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
Yeah, so people see this online and on social media, and they assume that is the actual Calvin, the original Calvin photograph, and it's not. It's a sort of an imaginative recreation that Nick and some artist working for the Sun or some other newspaper has sort of put together in the absence of the actual original image.
Yeah. So I suppose we saw the articles in the Sun and that crop up around 2020. And I think you'd kind of put that case to the side for the time being. So let's talk about how it came back into your life and how it was reinvigorated.
How it came back into my mind. This is where I've got to be really careful, because and I'm not going to go into how I track this character down, but I through quite legitimate investigative journalistic processes, I found someone who worked for DI-55 at the relevant time, and I didn't actually speak to him about this case because it wasn't in my mind at the time. I just learned who he was and approached him, in the open, just saying who I was and the fact that I knew he did what he did at the time, and he was quite happy to talk to me, no problem at all. So we had a long conversation about his time involved in UFOs, working for the Defense Intelligence Staff. And I've interviewed people who worked for DI-55 in the 1960s and 1970s. It's no big deal. Some of them won't talk, others will. Obviously, because they're concerned about all the other spooky stuff that they were involved in. But this guy was quite open, and I was just talking to him in general about UFOs. And I just, at one point, I just said, what case? Is there any case that like sticks in your mind as being the most unusual or strange whilst you were doing that job? And he said, oh yeah, there was that occasion in Scotland when two young lads were out on the moors, and I won't say what he said that they were doing, but they captured something on camera. 1 in a million chance they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and this thing appeared on. And he said this without me asking him about the Calvin case, and then immediately I thought, he's talking about Calvin, isn't he? And I asked him some questions about it, and I said, well, so what was it? And he said, well, I can't tell you what it was, but we know what it was, and it wasn't anything to do with aliens. It was an American secret reconnaissance aircraft. It was being escorted by British and American jets, but it was obvious, talking to him and asking questions about it, that they didn't know that initially, that they had to do a full investigation, and the Americans wouldn't admit it. And they got to the stage where he actually went. Well, I think a group of them shared that the image was shared with the American intelligence agencies, and there was an actual meeting or conference or something in Washington where both the British and American intelligence agencies scrutinized the photograph. And at that point, someone must have said, put their hand up, and yeah, it was one of ours, sort of thing. But obviously, they hadn't notified the British authorities officially. And all this may seem far-fetched, and people might say, well, where's your evidence for this? It's just anecdotal. Who is this person? But it suddenly dawned on me that I'd actually got written proof of this, because back in 2007, I'd put in a Freedom of Information Act request to the UFO desk, the last UFO desk officer, Paul Webb, basically for any documents that got on Aurora. Now, Aurora was this fabled hypersonic spy plane that the Scotsman had alleged was flying around at that time. And he sent me 4 or 5 documents that effectively confirms what I was told. And it didn't register with me straight away. Basically, there was this huge high-level meltdown between Britain and the Americans in, I think it was 1992, after they sent the photograph to the Americans, because the Americans assumed it was a British stealth aircraft that had been photographed, that basically we developed something, stealing their stealth technology, and were flying it around without telling them. You couldn't make it up. And I confirmed this with the guy who was the British air attaché at the Washington, D.C., Simon Baldwin, who's a former V bomber pilot. And I rang him up, and he was, I can't remember the photograph he said, but I remember being called in to the Pentagon by a 3-star general who was absolutely fuming after he saw the photograph. And the thing is, what had happened was the British intelligence, i.e. DI-55, had sent it to the CIA. The CIA had sent it to the Pentagon without telling the Pentagon that the source was Britain. And they assumed it was some kind of photograph that had been taken by Americans or something. I don't know. Anyway, so you can see how complex this gets.
Yeah.
And we haven't even got onto the main meat of the story yet.
No, absolutely.
And this is where Matthew comes into the picture, because Matthew had been making his own inquiries, and about this stage he dropped me a line on email, and then we started talking, and one thing led to another.
Yeah, it's I was blissfully unaware of all of most of what basically David's just run through. And I came across this in April 2021 when I started to see these tabloid articles about this huge extension to the closure period for the Calvine file. And I didn't really know much about it prior to that, but it just seemed astonishing and just, grossly excessive. Why would you need to conceal something for like 54 years? I think it was 2022 to 2076. And all the articles were very hyperbolic. It was like, the best UFO photograph ever taken. And we'd got this grainy black and white photocopy of a fax, of a drawing, and all that kind of thing. And they all sort of alleged or hinted that the photographs were in the file. And David Clark's name was prominent in the article. So I just happened to message him and said, is this any of this true, or what bits of it are true? And David then proceeded to give me the story and say, parts are and parts aren't. And there'd been the photographs were not in the file. That was the first key element. And then the second one was that all that's in the file that's redacted and being concealed, after an approach by the MOD to the National Archives, they actually went and requested this additional closure period, are the names of the witness and the RAF press officer that he spoke to. And that, again, sort of just stuck in the craw. Is just like, well, the RAF press spokesman would have been public-facing individual for a start, so his name would have been known far and wide. And then after a period of 30 years, why shouldn't the name of this witness be revealed, just like almost every other previous witness? Because like David said, when you go back and look at the files released pre-2000, there's the names of anyone and everyone, housewives, dog walkers, even children, and home addresses. Such and such was a schoolboy. He was at this school. This was his home address, and he saw a UFO and stuff like that. And it's just all there. And you just thought, well, why can't this one be revealed then? And you sort of thought, well, maybe there's something specific about this. And that was what first intrigued me. And then it was revealed that actually, en masse, they are restricting these pieces of personal information under Section 40 of the, ironically entitled Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah.
So, thanks to like all the additions that we've had with like the GDPR and the DPA and so on, the sort of the logic has been twisted, such that personal privacy has been elevated by these organisations to like the ne plus ultra, and nothing is more sacrosanct than not releasing these people's identities, for the fear that it's not even a fear that they will really become distressed at the nature of the contact, that just they will be contacted. That alone is reason enough not to permit their names to be released. And I've taken it all the way to the Information Commissioner's office, and I've made multiple cogent, coherent arguments, and the amount of evidence you present, it does not matter, because despite saying that I'd done research, and in the entire sort of modern history of ufology since the Kenneth Arnold sightings in 1947, not one person in Britain has ever complained officially that I can find evidence of, to the police, to the press council, to the press complaints commission, or to IPSO, all those three bodies governing press conduct. Not one person has ever complained of press intrusion.
And also,
in all that time.
The other point to make here, Matthew, is the fact that at the time the photographs were taken, the photographers sent the photographs to the Scottish Daily Record, which is one of the best read newspapers in Scotland, or was at the time. I don't know what the circulation was, but it must have been
about 1.5 million.
1.5 million. Now, how could it possibly be argued that that person was wanted to protect their privacy? You send something to a newspaper, you expect it to be used. I mean, I know they're making this specious argument now that, we can't assume that because they wanted publicity at the time that they want it now. But I mean, that is going to ridiculous extremes. You know, if they wanted privacy, they should never have contacted the Scottish Daily Record in the first place.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what you say, because it's not an argument. It's not an evidence-based argument.
It's not. And also, they're frightened of a precedent that if they allow one name out, then they're going to have to rely on all the rest of them.
Yeah.
So that was about April of 2021 when you and Matthew first started speaking. So let's just move it forward a few months to the first, I guess, major breakthrough.
Yes, well, Matthew's hit the nail on the head here, because he said not only the name of the witness has been redacted, but also the name of the RAF press officer. As he quite correctly said, how can you redact the name of someone who is a civil servant, who is in the public domain, who is speaking to the press every day? So at that point, I'd thought, right, well, if they won't give us the name of the witness, then we'll find the press officer, because it's not going to be very difficult to track him down. So, in fact, it was actually difficult to track him down. But being a sort of a shoe in the door type reporter who doesn't want to let things go, I pursued it, and I actually originally found the guy who did the job after the press officer, whose name is Craig Lindsay. So eventually we found the name Craig Lindsay, because he'd been obviously doing the job for, I think, a good 12 years, something like that. So he'd spoken to the press about dozens of different stories. The Lockerbie disaster. He'd even done other UFO stories, like there was a case in the Outer Hebrides in 1996 where an object was seen crashing into the North Sea, and there was a big air-sea rescue operation, and he was in charge of that. So he dealt with loads of UFO incidents. And it's to this day the first conversation I had with him on the phone. It sticks in my mind. I think we contacted him via social media initially, and he basically came back to me. And I said to him, I'd like to talk to you about something that happened in 1990, and I think he must have given me his phone number. So again, back to this thing about privacy. He was more than happy to talk to us. He had no problem at all. And I remember the first few words he said, I know what you're calling me about. And I said, do you? How do you know what I'm calling you about? And he says, you're calling me about that UFO photograph, aren't you, from Calvine? Wow. I've been waiting for someone to call me about that for 30 years.
And you're the first person.
And I'm the first person to do it. So despite all the publicity, despite all the stuff that Nick Pope's been pumping out about this, despite all the articles in the Sun, not a single person had made that connection and phoned him up and asked him about it. He was the one. He was the key, basically, that turned in the lock that has unlocked this 32-year-old cover-up, which is what it is.
Yeah. So let's talk about, you obviously continued conversing with Craig. So let's talk about the first piece of evidence that he provided you with.
Yeah, right. Well, basically, he said, I can't deny the fact that I was the person who was the Scottish Daily Record first contacted about this story. And basically, he said that he got a call out of the blue. At the time, he was based at RAF Petrevey Castle, which is a huge. We went there, Vinny, didn't we? Recently, when we met Craig, it's a block of flats now, but at the time it was like this maritime HQ where there was NATO, there was the Royal Navy, there was the RAF, and he was working for I think it's the Air Officer for Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's quite a responsible job. And one day, the phone rings, and it's the picture editor at the Daily Record, and he said, we've got this fantastic UFO photograph that's our exclusive. We're going to run it, and we'd like a comment. And Craig said, well, how can I comment? I need to see the photograph. And he said, well, there's actually 6 photographs from the negatives that we've been sent. And if you want, I'll pick out the best one and send it to you. So he put the phone down. A few days later, by courier, and the record had sent it by train, like an envelope, stiff cardboard envelope, came by train from their headquarters in Glasgow to Edinburgh. It was picked up by a photographer at their Edinburgh office and couriered to RAF Petrevie Castle. That's how important it was. And he opened it up, and there was this print inside the envelope, and the print, I think 8x3 color print, or appeared to be color, showing this, amazing sort of sharp image of this diamond-shaped object with a Harrier jump jet sort of turning behind it. And you can see he said you could see a line like a wire fence below and some overhanging trees. And these are the details. When he was telling me this, I was thinking, oh my God, this is the image, the one we've yet to see. And he said, yeah. And so what I did was I photocopied it. I did about 3 photocopies because I phoned up the UFO desk, spoke to the guy's contact there, who we've got to assume was Owen Artop at the time. And he said that they weren't particularly bothered. Oh, another UFO photograph, another fake sort of thing. Can you send it as down? And he said, well, I'll photocopy it for you. So he went, photocopied it in the office above, did about 3 photocopies. And obviously, if you're trying to photograph something that's very contrasty, it's difficult, isn't it? And don't forget, folks, this is 1990. This is before digital cameras. This is before all the technological wonders that we've got now. So basically, he had a fax machine. Do you remember them? So he photocopied the image and faxed it through to the UFO desk. And he said he had a chat with the people in the office and gets back down to his office. And the phone's ringing off the hook, and it's the guy from the UFO desk. And he's obviously wetting himself because he'd seen this image. And it was like, can you contact the photographers? Can you get us the negatives? And he was like a bit taken aback. Yeah, I'll do my best. So he phoned the Daily Record, spoke to the guy on Picture Desk and said, can you send the negatives to the Ministry of Defence? And this is where I, as a journalist, sort of start recoiling, because the guy on Picture Desk said, no problem. Yes, we'll send them to the Ministry of Defence. And obviously, that's exactly what he did. Sent them to the Ministry of Defence, and Craig was asked to phone, get the name of the photographer, which he got from this guy, and phone him up and write up what he said. And he basically typed up this lad's story, faxed it to the UFO desk in London, and was told, leave it with us, don't do anything else after that. So he didn't do anything else. He just waited for the story to appear. No story, which even to this day, he's 83 years old now. He cannot fathom why they didn't use the story. Anyway, later that year, this is the final bit of the saga, he headed down to London. He went on a regular monthly meeting, all the press officers, MOD main building, and because Craig is quite a sort of, he likes to know information, he doesn't like to let things go. He thought, right, well, while I'm here, I'll nip upstairs to visit our friend in the UFO desk and see how they're going on with the Calvine photographs. Open the door of and you know what's coming here. Open the door of the office. On the wall, massive blow-up poster, 3 foot wide, of the best print, the one that he'd sent to London. And he basically tried to find out what was going on, but obviously they weren't telling him much other than the fact they'd sent it to their top photographic analysts who hadn't been able to explain it. He questioned the UFO desk fella and basically said, what's going on with the UFO image? And basically said, we've sent it to our top experts and they haven't been able to explain it. All we can say is it's definitely not a fake. And it's quite funny because Craig actually used the paraphrase, the line from the end of the film Raiders of the Lost Ark when we were talking to him about this. The bit where they've got the Ark of the Covenant and they're wheeling it off into the big warehouse, and I think is it Harrison Ford or the other guy who's talking to the CIA, and they're saying this is really important, and it's like who's looking at it, and it was like our top people. We've got our top people,
top men,
our top men. So basically, as far as Craig was concerned, I mean, this is quite a story that he was telling. As far as he was concerned, that was the end of it. And as I was talking to him, I sort of said, "Well, have you kept anything? Did you keep it? Did you keep one of these photocopies?" And he said, "Well, yeah, actually, yeah, I've still got the envelope. I kept the envelope that the Scottish Daily Record sent, and I've got somewhere. I've got the photocopies that I took." And obviously, I was sort of, "Have you? Could you go and find them, please?" What had happened was when he retired in 1999, it turned out he'd still got the original print that the Daily Record had sent him, which he'd kept in his desk, and he'd actually carried it around with him for years, and was fond of sort of pulling it out of his briefcase and showing people, "What do you think of this?" And he was like out with different RAF people in Scotland. When he'd retired, he thought, "Well, I'm not chucking it away. I'm going to keep it." And even though no one else has approached me, he'd actually bought or read Nick Pope's book, and he'd seen what Nick Pope wrote about it, and thought, "Well, why has he just mentioned it in passing? This is an amazing story, and why has no one called me about it all these years?" So it was like, shall I throw it away or shall I keep it? And thank God he decided to keep it. Because not only it turned out not only had he kept the photocopies and the envelope, but he'd actually put the photograph inside this huge, great aircraft of the world volume, and that's where it had sat for 20 years until I phoned him up.
Yeah. So should we take a look at one of the photocopies?
Yeah.
Now
Look at one of the photocopies.
Let's have a look at that.
This is what we got to see first.
This was yeah. So that's what you got first.
Yeah, and that's not a bad to say that that's a photocopy of a photograph that he made back in 1990. I think it's pretty good that it survived in that condition.
Yeah, I thought it was when I saw this first, when you first last year. I was very excited to see this.
And this think about it. All we had was that cropped image of the UFO and the Harrier before this.
So it was like that.
Yeah.
And now then we got to this. So
yeah,
gives a bit more scale and depth of with the fence and the tree and stuff. So
this is a good point for Giles to come in, because Giles had seen a lot of the stories about this, and I'd put a message on the Pitlochry Facebook page appealing for anyone who knew anything about the story to come forward. And I think this is where Giles got in touch with us, this little sort of team, and became part of the team. And Giles was naturally living in the area, keen to find where this photograph was taken, because obviously it's a huge big deal.
Yeah, indeed. Just going back to the photocopy, it's genuine in my mind for the fact that it's clearly an overcast summer's day, which sums up Scotland. So there's something genuine straight away. There's no sunshine, there's no glare clearly or anything like that. So yeah, as I said, it's a very unusual mystery. It's a mystery in the area. There's a few people that know about it. Most people have never heard anything about it, and I'm talking people who've lived here all their lives. When I've raised the subject, they knew nothing of it. But no, as I think I've said before, it's not really anything that would surprise me, considering where we are. You don't, for instance, Calvine. You don't see Calvine unless you're in Calvine. You can't see Calvine from half a mile away. It's at the bottom of the glen, and you only see it when you actually physically walk into it or drive into it. So we're in a very secluded part of Scotland here. Even though we're on the A9, it's as I said, it's very much snakes through the glen here, and it would also be very quiet on an August evening back in 1990. There's not a lot of traffic comes up through the centre of the Highlands, the odd HGV, and that's about it, really.
Yeah, so I've got some images. Now, these images were from a journey that you took up to Pitlochry, David, and met Giles. And
we did a walk out a couple of months back.
Yeah. So I was actually going on a sort of a walking holiday with some friends of mine, and I managed. It was perfect because I arranged to meet Craig at Giles's home in near Calvine. It's about 5 miles from Calvine, where Giles.
So we're not even a mile, just outside.
Not even a mile, so it's even closer. Yeah,
it felt like 5 miles. I was going to say it was.
So it was a happy coincidence.
It's uphill. Yeah.
But before we met Craig the day before, me and Giles Giles has already done a lot of exploration of the area, but Giles said, "Right, I'm going to take you to where I think the photograph was taken." So this is the
obviously there wasn't much of a clue from the print at that stage. You had the foreground, but nothing really in the background, unfortunately. So we had basically a fencing to work with, and it was the spacing of the fencing that interested me, because fencing isn't replaced really up here. Fencing from 150 years ago is still prominent up here. So 30 years is nothing really. So anything from 1990 would probably still be around now. As I said, it's not really practice to take fencing away up here. You just tend to replace it, put a line of fencing in front if you needed to. But there's been no new fencing up here for a long time. So I think this is probably the location, which is a place called Struan Point, which is just outside Calvine. Probably half a mile outside of the village.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can see.
So we went up there, and when you get through that belt of trees, what are they, Giles? Are they Scots pine?
Oh God, now you're asking. Yeah, I think so.
but they are sort of unique, aren't they? There's no other trees.
Yeah.
And if you think about what
right.
those two guys told Craig, they went through like a small wood or a belt of trees.
Small little copse, yes. It's the only little. Yeah, I mean there would have been a few more trees there at the time. They've lost a few up there. I mean it's very much open to the elements up there. They tend to do a lot of plantations and then they'll clear. But I think this particular copse has been there for centuries. So
was this the west side of Calvine or the east side? And I know it. The road snakes. There were snakes rather, sort of east-west. But is it like which side was it again?
Of the village, it's just west of.
Just west of it, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. But everyone, I think I said before, everyone thinks it's north for the simple reason the A9 is a north-south road through Scotland, but through this particular part of the Highlands, it veers on a sort of east-west orientation.
And then I think also, so yeah, you can see. I mean, you can imagine, can't you, hiding in those kind of this spot
he's
now,
pointing his camera upwards as well. So unfortunately, you're missing some of the sort of profile. And the tallest mountain, I don't know whether you can see it there because I went up it a couple of days later, was Shialian, which is I think about 3,000 feet, 3,800 feet.
It's over. Yes, it's over 3,000 because it's a Monroe. So it's just out of shot there. But the in that image is part of what is the reconstruction photo. That sort of copse in front of you is in that picture. So
excellent. There's some more, and you can kind of see how secluded it is as well. It's just
This is it. You just wouldn't see anything.
This is the Athol Palace Hotel, which is where Craig was convinced that they were working when he phoned them. But the problem here is we made extensive inquiries. I tracked down the guy who was the general manager at the time, the guy who was the head chef, who is now the current general manager, and we also found the receptionist who worked there from 1985 to I think about 2005 or later. She would have been the person who, if she answered the phone, this is pre-mobile phone, don't forget. She would have known about it. All of them said they knew nothing about the story at all, which I found immediately very, very odd. And they weren't connected. Well, she certainly wasn't connected with the general manager, and even if they were trying to hide something, the other people we spoke to there had no knowledge of it at all. I think there was one contact that I think Matthew got via Facebook who said she vaguely remembered it being discussed at a disco or something at the hotel. But nothing, absolutely nothing. And you'd think if those two guys were working there, even temporarily, if something like that had happened to them, they would have told all the other people in the kitchens. Certainly the manager would have known about it. It just didn't make any sense. Okay, so after the bit of a hike that Giles and myself made up to Struan Point to find the location, scout around. We'd arranged to meet Craig the following day. Craig Lindsay. He came up from his home in southern Scotland, and we had a most entertaining, I think it was a good 2.5 hour session, question and answer session with him, where basically I asked him to tell the story, and you can hear a clip of him telling the story summarized at some point. And it came around to this bit about him having actually kept the photograph. So well, have you got the photograph? And he said, yes, it's here. Would you like to see it? So, yeah. So as you can see, we were busily firing off cameras, and he produced the original Calvine photograph, i.e. the one he'd been sent in 1990 by the Scottish Daily Record. So he'd brought that along, and he brought the envelope that it arrived in and the photocopies. So he got them all there, and he was quite reluctant to part with them at that stage. He was a bit worried about whether, he was sort of subject to the Official Secrets Act. He was also concerned about data protection, because on the back of the print was written in bright red letters the name of the copyright holder, we presume the name of the photographer, and it says care of Scottish Daily Record, but he wouldn't let us see the name, and he wouldn't let us get too close to the photograph. But we took some pretty good photos of him holding the image, which you're now going to see.
There we go. Original print. So that print, like you said, was printed off by the Scottish Daily Record at the time.
Yes, at the time. And sent to him, sent to Craig at RAF Petrevie Castle. And Craig showed it a few people to get an opinion. He took a photocopy of that original image and faxed it to the Ministry of Defence. That's what then led to the massive sort of investigation. But no one came back to him. He was told basically, keep your mouth shut, forget about it, don't talk to anyone about it. But no one thought to ask him, have you kept the original print? And he had, and locked it away. Thankfully for us and for history, yeah, he saved it. I've got to say, I think Craig is a hero. He's done everyone a huge favour by sort of thinking this is something really significant and important, and I need to keep it for the future, which is what he did.
And that's him with the original envelope.
Which is, again, I know the photo is amazing, but I just think having the envelope it came in as well, very clearly marked Scottish Daily Record. And you can see they obviously took a lot of care that this was sent by train over to their Edinburgh office, and their Edinburgh photographer, whose name is on there. I've spoken to him. He doesn't remember anything about it, but he was obviously sent physically to carry it then and deliver it to Petrevie Castle, which is where Craig received it.
And you also interviewed him while you were there. Now, that was quite a substantial interview, but I have edited it down to kind of highlight the main points from the interview. So we'll take a listen to that now.
Okay, so just say who you are and how you got involved in this.
Craig Lindsay. I was Public Relations Officer to the RAF in Scotland, on the staff of the Air Office of Scotland and Northern Ireland. I was in the office one morning, the phone rang, picked it up, and it was somebody on the picture desk at the Daily Record saying that they'd got a story from a couple of guys who'd seen something in the air at Calvine, and would the RAF care to comment on it? And I said, well, not really, because I don't know what I'm being asked to comment on. What does it look like? He said, I said, well, what about sending me a photograph, a print? He said they had come in with 6 negatives, and it looked convincing, so they wanted the RAF to comment. So I said, well, what about a print? Yeah, no bother at all. I'll get one done, and we'll get it to you as soon as possible. And I think it was the next day, a hardback envelope was delivered to my room, opened it, and inside was a photograph. What I had done was to say to my colleagues in London I had the call from the records, the photograph had come in, and again, it was whoever it was I was talking to, oh yeah, another one. I said, well, this one is a bit more interesting than anything I've ever seen. And I'll tell you what, I'll fax it to you. Oh, fine, right. So I went up the stairs to the registry. Had great difficulty getting a decent print out of it because I couldn't risk the print going through the fax machine.
Yeah.
So I had to get a piece of plain paper, a copy of it. Eventually got one. They were either too black or too light, and put one in. Pressed the button, chatted with the registry staff for a couple of minutes, walked back down to my office, and the phone was ringing, and it was my contact in London. Tell me more about this. I said, well, I can't really tell you anything more about it, but that's what you've got. Can you get the prints? And I said, well, I can ask the record and see what's what. And then he asked, could I, if possible, could I get the names and contacts for the people who allegedly saw this thing? Again, I'll ask the record because they've got what they said would be an exclusive on it. And I rang back and yeah, no problem. I'll send the negatives to whoever you want me to do. And here's the names and here's a phone number. And what happened after that? Basically, I think I just picked up the phone, tried the number. It was the Athol Palace Hotel. Is so-and-so around? Yes, I'll get him for you. And I can't remember. You're going back a long time.
Yeah, definitely Athol Palace then.
It was definitely. My memory is that Athol Palace. Tell me what you did. Who are you? I can't remember if I asked where they were from, but they were, as far as I can remember, an English accent. They were a part, what do you call it, holiday workers at the Athol Palace, mainly washing dishes and for pocket money. And that, as far as their trip out that night was, they parked the car, they went, what he couldn't, I can't remember now whether he said it was a long distance. I don't think it was terribly far, but the bits that I do remember was they went through a wood, came to the edge of it, climbed the over the barbed wire fence, started to walk over moorland, and then realised there was something in the air above them or near to them, and they thought, shit, this is, I don't like the look of this. Turned on their heel, ran back, tumbled over the fence, and hid in bushes or behind trees or something in the wood, and sat and looked at this thing which just simply sat in the sky. And I asked him, do you know how big it was? No idea how big it was. We didn't know whether it was close to us, how far away it was, or anything. But what was it? After he reckoned 2-3 minutes, didn't time it, they heard the sound of a jet aircraft which went by going north, and a minute or two later they heard the jet again, and it came back and it circled, get this right, anti-clockwise 3, maybe 4 times, and then headed off back on its original course.
Which suggests the pilot must have seen the same thing they.
He must have seen something, and they waited another minute or two wondering what the hell to do. And at that point, at some point in this thing, they'd sort of stuck the camera out behind wherever it was they were hiding, shot off, it turned out to be 6 frames, and the thing started to move upwards slowly, and then just shot vertically upwards and disappeared, way up in the sky. And the bit that I very clearly remember was, and I said, well, what sort of noise did it make? And he said, it didn't make any noise. I said, what do you mean it didn't make any? It was silent, no noise at all, nothing. And that was the end of the conversation. So I sat down, I typed out the basics of it, put it in the fax machine, sent it to London. And I can't remember if it was later in the day or the next day, I got a phone call from my colleague there who said, "Thank you very much for all this. From now on, leave it to us."
So they'd said to you, leave it to us after that point, but what happened then? What was your next?
I just left it. The next contact, I suppose, would have been some weeks later when I was in London at one of the routine meetings, and I went up the stairs and opened the door, and there on the other far wall was this giant poster-sized picture of the object and its little aircraft at the side. Right, it was at eye level, right on the other side, on the wall.
How big as a person?
I mean, this kind of thing, 3 foot wide.
Colour?
Oh, colour.
Of the print that you'd seen, exactly the one.
Exactly.
So did you ever see the other 5 images then?
I have a faint, but the reason I am sure I did was because when I talked to the record, I forgot about this, the picture editor I spoke to, I said, you choose the one that you think is the best one. And I got this thing in my mind that I must, because seeing the other ones, the aircraft is in different positions. The basic picture is the same.
Yeah.
And all that's different is that the aircraft is on the left-hand side of the frame, or it's on the far, left-hand or right-hand, or it's nearly going behind the object. But this particular one, where it's there, is the one that I think any picture editor would have chosen as being the...
So how did you see the other images then?
They must have been in that office.
Oh, in London?
I didn't see the negatives or anything like that, but they obviously, as well as doing the big poster-sized print, they obviously had 10 by 8s or something like that. I again can't remember the detail, but certainly they were, because in looking at them, I do remember seeing, as the picture editor said, the aircraft in different positions.
So you never had access to the negatives? They went straight from the record to...
No, I gave the chap at the record the name and address of the people in London who wanted to have use of the negatives, or see the negatives, and the record had no objection to it. And as I said, when I talked to London, maybe a couple of days or a day later, they'd received them, and when I visited, I sort of asked what was happening. Oh, they've gone off to be looked at by the appropriate people. I think the last thing I had was, well, it's being investigated. We've sent the negatives back. I didn't ask. I just assumed it was back to the record.
So they did tell you that they'd sent the negatives back?
Yeah, we've sent the negatives back. We've had a good look at them, and again, I thought, well, they've told me not to get involved, so I just did as I was told. Sorry, the only comment I got was that they had a good look at them and they couldn't find anything to prove that the negatives had been, what was the word, interfered with or manipulated in any way.
Yeah. So it wasn't a fake, basically.
Well, draw your own conclusions.
Yeah. Did they say who they'd sent it to? Specialist staffs?
Jarek was the only one that was mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the fount of all knowledge as far as photo interpretation is concerned. I mean, these guys, well, they know what they're looking for.
So that was Craig talking about how he got hold of the images and his involvement. So then obviously you went off on your walking holiday, David, and returned back home to Sheffield. And you were still speaking with Craig. So let's move it into the negotiation stage and then leading up from there.
Well, I mean, it was finding Craig and all this new information all spilling out. That, I mean, as the little group then went into overdrive, didn't we? I mean, we were just following. It was like a proper, old-fashioned journalistic investigation where we were just following up every single lead. And I should mention that while I was in Pitlochry, I went to all the several hotels, because we didn't know for sure whether it was the Athol Palace or one of the others. We had a little poster printed up saying anyone with information, cash reward for information. And the bizarre thing was we got virtually nothing back, which I just find, even now, I find bizarre. But we'd made this huge breakthrough. Yeah, here we go, cash reward. we contacted some local police officers who were community officers at the time. They tried to help us, but we didn't get very far with that. We had stuff on in the local newspapers, on the local Facebook group, and the good thing was Craig, I think, realised that this was something really, really significant, and he couldn't just disappear off into the distance again for another 30 years. And he was a bit reluctant about. He wanted to get rid of the photograph. He doesn't want publicity. He doesn't want to be in the spotlight. So the solution we came up with was he didn't own the photograph. He couldn't sell it. He didn't want to retain it. So I just said, well, the obvious solution, Craig, is why don't you donate it to my university, to the library and archives, and we'll act as the custodians. We'll take it off your hands. Obviously, there's going to be a story about this. I'm going to write something for one of the newspapers. It will all come out, and if you don't want to be bothered by all the publicity that it's going to bring, let us deal with it. And we will negotiate the image rights. He was a bit worried that once it gets on the internet, that people are just going to plagiarize it. They're just going to copy it, because we don't know who the copyright belongs to. It's just going to get, everyone will want a piece of it. So, I mean, this is what we've been grappling with over the last few months, and that's why it's taken so long to actually make this program that we're now making and put the truth out there. It's been a long, hard job, hasn't it? I mean, I think you'll all agree. It's just good to be able to actually talk about this now, because we've had to keep it secret, and I hate keeping things secret.
Of course.
And at any stage, bits of it could have leaked out. But the fact is, Craig actually handed the photograph, the envelope, and everything else to do with the case over to myself and Vinny. Was it end of June, beginning of July, Vinny?
It was the very end of June. That's right. Yeah,
we met Craig at RAF Petrevey Castle. We had a really good long chatter with him, didn't he? And he handed it over, I think, with a sigh of relief. So basically, we now have in Sheffield Hallam archives the original print.
Craig was mystified as to why the story never ran in the Daily Record, but after a little bit of sleuthing, we think we found the reason for that. And there'd always been a query whether this was a D notice had been issued over the story. So D notice were issued by an organisation based in London, which today is known as the DSMA committee. And I contacted them and asked, and they said no, we've got no record of a D notice being issued. But then we'd got that memo that David had found, in which it referred to a sighting in which a D notice had been issued. So we weren't sure whether that was this one, or whether it was, say, the Boscombe Down incident, or whether it was one we were unaware of. But then we knew what the name of the editor of the Daily Record, who he was in 1990, and whose name was Endel Laird. He's deceased now, but I just, out of curiosity, emailed the DSMA committee and said, who was serving on your committee in 1990, please? And they sent me a list, and I was just scanning down it, and lo and behold, there in the middle, Endel Laird.
Yeah.
So there was no need. You'd sent it. You possibly sent it to like the worst newspaper you could have picked, with a guy at that point serving on the committee designed specifically to keep things like this out of the public eye.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I should make the point that the press don't have to pay any attention to what the D Notice Committee tells them.
No.
And when this idea that newspapers and media are served with D notices is an anachronism. That might have happened back in the First World War. It's certainly not happened for the last 20 or 30 years. What there are standing D notices, which anyone can read. They're on the internet. which cover things like, revealing the names of SAS soldiers and, where nuclear weapons are stored and potential threats to national security. So they don't actually serve anything. What happens is, if you're a journalist and you're working on a story that you think might have national security implications, you can, if you want, and you don't have to, phone this nice gentleman, brigadier, whoever he is, at the MOD, and explain what it is you're working on, and that person will then advise you as to whether he thinks it's advisable to publish or not. But you can just listen to that and disregard the advice. So I think what's happened in this case is that the when the negatives were returned to the Daily Record, it seemed as this chap Endel Laird was actually on the committee, because there are press representatives who sit on the committee, which meets every month or however often at the Ministry of Defence main building, and press people they serve a period of time, 6 months, and then someone else will come from ITN or whatever. And all that what could have happened in this case is it just tapped him on the shoulder at one of the meetings and just said, those photographs that you've been sent, given the fact that, the Gulf War is going on, and this is something we've not mentioned, that this sighting happened 2 days after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. All they would have had to say is this was some kind of secret exercise that was going on as we were sending our aircraft and stuff over to Iraq. It could compromise national security if you publish your story, and please don't publish it. And he obviously, we're guessing he took the advice. It's the only explanation as to why the story didn't run.
Yeah. So I guess, we got back with the photograph then after collecting it. I think now we're just about to hit the hour mark. Would be a good time just to bring up the image itself in its glory.
Here it is.
So let me... There we are. So that kind of doesn't work. There we go. That's better. So yeah, let's talk about, obviously it went back with myself and you to Sheffield to go into the archives, which it's there now, isn't it? But let's talk about, the photograph itself and what you've had done with it so far.
Yeah, immediately, a colleague of mine at the Centre for Contemporary Legend, Andrew Robinson, who is an expert photographer, and brilliantly, his expertise lies in pre-digital photography. That's what he's interested in. I told him about this, and straight away, because he's done work on the Cottingley Fairy photograph, he's interested in the paranormal. Straight away it was, I need to look at this photograph, and I can sort of get a high resolution scan, and I can sort of try and work out, as the MOD did, using the sort of, the fence posts and the relative distances. I don't understand all this. He said, I'll do my best to try and work out how large the object is and how far away it is. And he did. I mean, we can put his report up on your website, Vinny. But he went into a massive amount of detail. I was amazed what he was able to work out. But he was able to say from the paper and from what was printed on the paper, definitely this is a genuine print of that era, dated 1989, 1990, no doubt about it, and basically said whatever was photographed was an object in front of the camera. It's not a cutout that's been pasted and rephotographed. Well, you've read the report, so what did you glean from it?
I mean, it's very in depth. The levels of detail, like you said, with the paper and things like that. It's fantastic read. So yeah, I'll link that below as well if anyone wants to go and check that out. It's it's really interesting.
But he actually was able to work out the approximate length of the object as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he literally goes into all the details.
It was interesting as well that his findings seemed to indicate someone with a knowledge of photography or an interest in photography had taken the picture. It was taken using better quality film than your average photographer would have used. And like you say, he couldn't detect any abnormalities in the print at all to indicate any hoaxing or anything like that. So it's really hugely detailed. XP1 paper, I think it was, and the Kodak writing on the back, and we've got the provenance. We've got it's well, the chain of custody is only one link long, isn't it? Really, you know, well, two links. You know, the record made it. They sent it to Craig, and he kept it.
And you can actually discern on this the original print. There is some you can see some of the landscape in the distance, and he did pick that out. I mean, did that tell you anything new, Giles, when you saw the high res?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame there's, you know, like you mentioned Schehallien earlier, there isn't sort of Schehallien in the background and we could work out exactly where it was. So in a way, that kind of gives a clue in itself. It was clearly taken at a reasonably high elevation. The fact that there isn't any, you know, high terrain in the background, you're not looking at, you know, this object in front of a mountain, you're looking at, you know, and it's pretty sort of, it's almost not too far above the high line of the photographer, does it? So, but yeah, I mean, it's going back to the photo. It's obviously not going to win any awards for its aesthetic beauty, but it's really. I mean, it must go now straight into the top 10 potentially most significant photographs ever taken.
Oh yeah,
if you think about it, I mean, it's top 5 even if you really think about what we're dealing with here. When you can perhaps discard the fact that it's a hoax, which I think, you know, we get into that stage where we can. So, you know, that only leaves a couple of alternatives, really, doesn't it? So,
this is the only surviving image of the Calvine UFO. You know, all the rest of them have disappeared somewhere, possibly destroyed, possibly hidden in some vault somewhere. They're never going to release those images. So the fact that Craig saved this one and we now have it is we are so lucky to actually have access to that image.
Absolutely. So, well, you know, everyone watching, I hope, you know, I'd like to know. So I'd like to hear some feedback, in fact, from people, what they think about it, you know, because it's certainly going to be a conversation starter for a lot of people. But one other thing surrounding this case is there's still a lot of, you know, nuances and details about what it actually was, and we haven't kind of really touched upon it in this video. But maybe in the next couple of weeks we'll get back together and do another one, and we'll just literally talk about everything. If you guys are up for that,
and take questions from the audience.
Take questions. Yeah, we'll do a live show and take questions. So, yeah, before we finish, gentlemen, does anyone have anything else that they want to say, or?
Well, I just want to thank you as a team for being such fantastic colleagues over the last few months, and you know, I don't think any of us could have done this on our own, actually, because we've all played a sort of a unique part in putting this all together.
Thank you. It's been a real privilege to be part of this as well. It's you know, it's been a saga at times. It really has, and you know,
it's not over yet.
No, it's not. It's not over. You know?
Definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I can feel the men in black coming down the drive already.
Well, listen, gentlemen, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for everything. And thank you to everyone watching. Like you said, come and check out the channel for a follow-on video where you can come and ask all of your questions. I'm sure there's going to be a lot. But for now, we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.